All right. Welcome, everyone. Good evening. I'm Johan Matthews, and I'll be guiding our conversation today, our conversation with our Co-op Navigator Fellows on homegrown co-op ecosystems. So a big welcome to our fellows, a big welcome to everyone who's tuned in today to join us. We're going to be talking about how we cultivate co-op coevolution. Okay. All right. So with that, let me do a little housekeeping. Today's session is going to be recorded. So if you would not like your likeness captured, it's unlikely that it would be. Feel free to stay off camera or, instead of coming off mute, dropping your comments in the chat. We're going to invite questions at the end, but you can you can create your questions in the chat the entire time. So a little bit about us, the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast. We've been around for about 50 years. So if you're not familiar, it's a good time to get to know us. We've been providing co-op-friendly financial products, loans, credit, those types of things to cooperative enterprises, businesses organized as co-ops, and services such as our business coaching for co-ops and providing connections and educational content and programs such as the Co-op Navigator Fellowship. Ultimately, we're a way to connect socially concerned investors with socially conscious enterprise. So if you'd like to invest in that, feel free to reach out. It's a little bit about the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, or CFNE for short. I'm a member of the learning team here at CFNE, and we are thinking and learning every day about how we better engage communities that have been disconnected from this movement, and how do we help those communities to make use of the co-op model in ways that are supportive for them. So since 2019, we've supported hundreds of co-ops and co-op curious entrepreneurs in identifying their goals and taking the next steps towards realizing their cooperative dreams. So if you'd like to connect with us, reach out, Co-op Fund, that co-op, and search for coaching. Today, we've got about 90 minutes, and we'll be going through what this program is, providing an overview of the Co-op Navigator Fellowship, and then we're going to engage in our community reflection. We're going to hear from our fellows as they discuss what this experience has been like for them, some of the lessons learned, and some of the lessons you can learn from them. So should be a great, rich conversation. At the end, hopefully we have some time for Q&A. If folks stick around, maybe we'll have more time. But otherwise, we're going to dive in with a program overview. And so if you have a question throughout this session, feel free to drop it in the chat. All right. So why did we start this program, right? One thing we recognized, a little bit before the pandemic, is that this nation's history of racially motivated economic exclusion has left communities across the Northeast without culturally relevant co-op development. So whether that's the way co-op development is funded, largely rural areas with USDA, or just the effectiveness of these racially motivated policies to diminish wealth in these communities, and that disinvestment acts as a barrier to allowing groups to come together in solidarity and to create enterprises that can respond to their needs, right? Not having everything they need to tell their stories and to realize their dreams. So that trauma of disinvestment, right? So recognizing that and how useful co-ops can be to some of these communities, we put up some of our own funds, right? $800,000 to kickstart this initiative, right? We realized we needed to help to change the face and ultimately the mind of the co-op movement. People need to see themselves in this movement to join in, right? And we know it's critical for more and more of us to understand why we need new ways of doing things, even though this method isn't necessarily new, why we need to come together and respond to the needs in our communities. So that's how we got into this. But we didn't get into it alone, right? It was a co-created initiative. Many of the partners who became host sites, we were consulting with them since the onset of the development of the program. So they helped to design it, right? We co-designed it, worked with Black communities, Latinx communities, Indigenous rooted communities, and so on, to think about what was needed and how we can inform the development of this program. So we worked together to create this and then participate in it. And how does it work? It's a 3-year fellowship, right? So you're going to meet 4 of the fellows today. We have 5 in total, but you should be able to just meet 4 tonight. I think 1 is having an issue. But how does it work, right? So for over 3 years, our fellows are partnered with community-based economic development organizations across the Northeast, whether you're working to do business development up in Maine or support worker rights and immigrant justice down in Rhode Island, or you're trying to support co-ops across New York and Massachusetts, right? We partnered with these locally led, community-centered institutions who could think about how co-ops can be an offering, right? How co-op development could be something they offer their community. So we partner with them to identify, hire, train, and mentor local co-op interested organizers and entrepreneurs, right? Individuals who had an interest in this, whether they're in business or in community organizing, and wanted to learn more, wanted to be a part of a community, and wanted to make an impact in this way, to become co-op navigators. And over those 3 years, in the first year, they met twice a month, once for training from culturally resident mentors, folks who they can identify it with, who made it through this system and became co-op developers in some way, shape, or form. And they also created communities of practice. So we meet once for training and another time to just think about how do we practice and embody this work more. Ultimately, after studying these models for the 3 years, after year 1 learning, year 2, they started thinking about what opportunities might exist in my community and how do I help this whole site to embed these learnings to sustain this operation. So that's a bit about the model. If you guys have any other questions, drop it in the chat or reach out to us. It's an interesting program. I know a lot of folks are curious, and we would love to see it replicated or inspire your efforts across the country. So that's a lot of what we're trying to do here as well, to catalyze a different set of thinking and approaches around co-op development, right? How do you kind of decolonize it, make it homegrown, and think beyond the individual enterprises, but think around the ecosystem. So we learn a little bit more about that today from our fellows. I'm going to stop sharing and give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. So welcome, guys. How you guys doing? You guys all right? I didn't even get to shake it off. I've been moving all day, man. I said before this call, I'm gonna do some jumps. I didn't even get to do it. So I hope you guys got your shake offs. So let's dive in. I want to invite you guys to introduce yourself, just who you are, where you live, and the whole site that you worked with. And then to answer a follow-up question, what inspired you to become a Co-op Navigator Fellow, to take on this role where you're quote unquote a new face in the co-op movement and a welcoming face to bring people into this movement. So I want to start with you, Desi, and then we can rotate down.
Thank you so much. And I'm Desiree Nicole Lester. You can call me Desi, and I am from Portland, Maine, primarily right now based in Rockland, Maine. My host site, Four Directions Development Corporation, located in Bangor, Maine. So I get all around Maine and also, around the Northeast to visit the fellows, which such a great experience. And just thinking about what brought me to the fellowship is being in the midst of systems breaking down and working remotely and thinking about how I want to work in the future. Where are the responsive spaces in the time of crisis? And I think we're going to see more of that coming up. And so that's how I got the opportunity to connect with the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, and was referred by Black-owned Maine that had emerged during that time of lockdown and really started to gain support in the community in Portland. And someone referred me to this fellowship opportunity. So very grateful for these past 3 years with you all, and yeah, to be here tonight. So I'll pass it.
Thank you, Desi. Welcome. Glad you're here. David, I want to invite you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you decided to become a fellow?
Uh, my name is David Molina Hernandez. You can call me David. Um, I I am part of a worker center called Fuerza Laboral. We focus on labor rights. And we are located on Central Falls, which is the mostly dense and small city of Rhode Island. Um, Working there, I started to know about worker-owned cooperatives, something that it sense in my mind, but I started to get it like to actually go further and how see how it worked. And I got interested. And when the opportunity came for Fuerza Laboral to have a fellowship with CFNE, I expressed my interest in actually getting to know more what was all about. So I ended up representing my nonprofit in this fellowship. So that's how I got here.
Sure. That's already in the game. Learning more. Thank you, David. Welcome. Glad you're here. Want to invite Varun to introduce yourself and why you joined.
Hey y'all, Varun Katar Sharma. Hope you can hear me okay. I'm here in Hartford, Connecticut, and I work at Reset, which is a nonprofit that is working to advance the social enterprise sector in Connecticut broadly, which includes cooperatives. But here in Connecticut, cooperatives we're a underdeveloped ecosystem, and so this was a kind of for me and for myself, personally, I was new to the co-op movement. I shopped at the local food co-op, heard about co-ops, but I had never been involved in a co-op or kind of had but was an organizer working in the immigrant rights movement and was experiencing a lack of workplace democracy. Some of you have heard me say this story over and over again, a little bit of a broken record, but I had been, just struggling with a lack of living wages, with a lack of workplace democracy in the nonprofit sector where I've been working for, my adult life. And so this opportunity kind of presented itself at a time where I was in a transition, personally looking for ways to use my skills as a facilitator, as an organizer to, advance movement building work, but in a way that was more aligned with my values trying to find a way for myself to find more dignified work. And so this kind of happened through serendipity, and I'm grateful I stumbled into this opportunity and have been on this journey for the past 3 years and for many more, hopefully. So that's me.
Thank you. Welcome. I think we can all relate to that. Those issues in the nonprofit sector. Glad you're here. Welcome, Steph. I want to invite you to introduce yourself and tell us why you became a fellow.
Hey everyone, I'm Steph Wiley. I am living in Poughkeepsie, New York, but my work is based in Brooklyn, New York. I'm an worker owner founder of Brooklyn Packers in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. We are a worker-owned food distribution cooperative, and we've been around for 10 years. And I have been a worker owner and also a co-op advocate for just about as long, and professionally a co-op advocate. And the reason why this was a great interest to me is because often there were not in the places that decisions about co-ops are being made, there often weren't a lot of people of color with power. And we needed to, and we still need to, in a lot of ways, change that. So going through this this fellowship has been really instrumental in like sharpening my ideas and really looking at from my like kind of long experience to the experience that some of my fellows have been going through, it really helped, like kind of like shaped some ideas around like how we do this going forward. And so it's been a really beautiful experience, and definitely a learning experience, and also just you know, a way to just get better at what I'm doing. And so I appreciate that.
Excellent. Excellent. Welcome. Welcome. Glad you're here. Legend of the game. So let's dive in. Let's dive in. Okay. I want to start with you, Desi, but first, we're here to talk about homegrown co-op ecosystems. I think some of us are familiar with those terms. What does it mean to be a homegrown institution or homegrown initiatives? And what does it mean to be an ecosystem? So we'll move through these topics one by one. So let's start with homegrown. I think about this concept of homegrown institutions as institutions that are emerging out of and are responsive to a specific community's essential needs and aspirations, right? It's for them. It's not just coming in from the outside imposed. And I think this is important to start with you, Desi, because you're working with Four Directions up in Maine with the Native Indigenous communities, right? And they have a long history and tradition of democratic organizing, right? Inspiring the great law of peace and stewardship, community ownership, right? It's baked into their culture and their way of doing things. Yet it's not uncommon for, and I'm sure we've learned, but for a developer or some well-intentioned person to come into that community and say, hey, here's the co-op model, right? This is how it's got to go. These are the business models. These are the government structures. Take it, do it. We promise you it's going to work, right? And how often it does not, right? And so we know that the form of the co-op is a vessel, right, for the spirit of cooperation, right? And we can see that spirit alive in businesses and nonprofits. And, it's not necessarily just about the form, right? We have to center that community and its needs as it tries to engage and embody this cooperative spirit. So I feel like your work speaks to that well. So I want to invite you to share with us kind of how this spirit of cooperation and how your experience supporting the communities up in Maine helped to shape your approach to co-op development, right? How is it that you came to have more of a homegrown perspective, and how that community can have homegrown co-op development? How did the spirit of cooperation help to inform how you think of this and approach this work?
Yes, thank you again. And I'm just, having my niece here with me and thinking about community. I've got my background on because not where I normally would be calling in from, but definitely
Beautiful.
might hear some children in the background. Yeah, I getting to know Four Directions. I think, when you're having a new experience, you can come in really excited, to share the work or to share something new that you're excited about. And, what I found right away is, taking the time to actually just sit back and listen and get to know the community before, I know what I have the capacity to offer or even what they're open to accept at that time. And how do you show up to community, see what's already there, and recognizing, like I said, that spirit of cooperation, not just coming in with like, I have the answers, but coming in and looking to see what, where you see them working across organizations or working across tribes or working across institutions, what resources are being shared. And I think that, we're not often, or what I came to learn and kind of know, or as I got to see what how many different types of cooperatives, because very much like Varun, you know, new coming into learning about cooperatives, it was mainly like with the local food co-op that my relationship was, and like being a member, and then I started to dive in deeper when I was looking to see where I want to work and how I want to work next, and so just having the opportunity to really get to know what is already happening in the community. For example, like community days with the tribes in August, each one hosts a community day. And so over the past 3 years, I've had the opportunity to show up to those community days and get to know the community members and see how, you know, they're sharing seeds here and where they grow, and then the restaurant that it's sold at, you know, through the summer and the fall. And yeah, I don't know if I'm touching in on exactly what I wanted to answer right now. Just have a little bit of a distraction, but yes, let me just maybe let you reflect a little bit back to me, and then I can tap in again.
No, I think you touched on plenty, and we've got plenty of time to help unfold some of these, you know, that listening, being critical, and that invitation on the part of the community to invite you in. And I think after 3 years, you being able to show up to the barbecue is, you know, pretty cool and special, you know. So I think it does speak to that approach.
Yeah, and that also let me, I mean, you know, seeing who was really showing up was artisans and the makers and identifying my first project where, you know, getting to know the craft community and how that is a way to pass down cultural knowledge and representation, and that is shared in a way where it's usually not for sale, you know, and then how do you show up? How do you charge for that? Because I think community days are really where it's open to everyone to come and to get to know the community and share food, or, you know, share the you know, the moose jerky that we all, you know, that the health center, you know, because you can only have so many permits for how many can be harvested and things like that. And like, you know, experiences that I normally wouldn't have. Even growing up in Maine, I think I didn't have the opportunity to ever meet the tribes, or there was no curriculum in place. Like now, you know, there is more of a push. I think that's one thing that I see shifting from really no education or opportunity to learn about the tribes here in Maine, and thinking like, oh, they're not here anymore, and so, you know, we don't really have to learn the language, we don't really have to learn the culture, we don't really have to show up to certain community days or events. And now, you know, I'm someone that my community can come to and say, hey, where can I take that language class? And I'm like, okay, I got you. Like, this is who you need to know, this is who you need to speak to, and that people show up to me, you know, as a resource, and that feels really good.
Yeah, you're hitting it. You're hitting it. You know, that listening.
Okay, just stop me anytime.
It's all good. I'm just reframe, but we keep going. We'll keep going. I know you guys so much, but just to put it in a package, you know, showing up and listening, right? These two ears, paying attention, looking, seeing what's there, right? A lot of times we see what's not there. How do you see what's there? And how do you wait to be invited? A lot of the times we show up, we take initiative, very important, but things don't last. People see it didn't work, they get traumatized, and they're wary of new folks who show up, right? Having to navigate that. And ultimately showing up and ultimately having them show up for you, show up to ask you for help. So I feel like that was great. Thank you. Let's keep going, right? What's this homegrown co-op development thing we're talking about, right? How do we keep things homegrown? How do we respond to that? What's there? So David, I want to invite you to kind of talk about your experience, right? Down in Rhode Island, work with Fuerza Laboral. You guys are thinking about workers' rights and immigrant justice, and you guys have a long history of intimacy with the population you're serving. And there's also a lot of invisibility, right? We see a lot today in the news around kind of human rights violations and how folks are treating folks, right? The xenophobia and all of that. But we don't see a lot of things too, right? We don't see wage theft and kind of the injustice that you're responding to. So kind of how does these issues of intimacy and invisibility inform your approach to co-op development and do so in a homegrown way?
Yeah, well, thank you, Johan. Yes, so our approach to the cooperative world, to solidarity economy in Fuerza Laboral comes not from a business perspective that we were like, oh, we want to start making businesses. It comes because the first mission of the organization was to find justice for immigrants, both documented and undocumented, and low-income communities that surround us, what we sometimes call the under economy, for people that cannot really access the normal economy. And this is the people that suffer the most and the most different and varied types of injustice in their workplaces. So, well, Fuerza Laboral, we just turned 19 years doing the work, and most of those years were focused on we are going to help people that have been victims of labor injustice, wage theft, discrimination, harassment, anything that you can imagine happens to people. And everything is sort of invisible for the community at large. That's why we call it like the under economy. So as Fuerza Laboral was not only seeing these problems, trying to find solutions for these problems, it was also finding that these problems become cyclical, and people that have been victims of this will be victims again in the future. Or even worse, people that have been victims learn how to victimize other people. So we were like, okay, but what's going on here? What can we do for people that will change this vice, this cycle of vice that happens among labor rights and among work injustice in the workplace? And that's how the organization found worker-owned cooperatives to be the best way to fight work injustice. So our approach to co-op development comes from what you don't see, what the things that you are not thinking about are affecting the community, and how co-op development can be a solution for the problems that the community is facing. So for us, it's important to always center what are the problems of the community, and from those problems, for those things that are becoming the difficult part, see how the ecosystem can be formed for these problems to be solved, right? For the community to actually have something of value. So Fuerza Laboral, since 2014 or something, started to impulse the solidarity economy and cooperative movement in Rhode Island, because as Desi has said, as Barun said in introduction, is I am going to say it was just like pretty small movements in our states. And it was something that needed a bigger voice, that needed a stronger legislation so people could understand what cooperatives meant and all of that. And that has been like the process of the organization of like, okay, we're going to make an ecosystem in Rhode Island of cooperatives, but not from the business perspective of we are going to introduce a new way of making businesses or making institutions, more of like, oh, this is a way that we can find solutions for the problems that people are facing, like mostly labor rights and human rights.
Excellent. Fantastic. Yeah, I love how you put that. And just the concept of how do you see these invisible issues in the under economy, right? Folks who experience injustice have no recourse, it's invisible. And then they grow up and become victimizers, right? This invisible chain of violence that might happen. And then recognizing that we can see these issues. So let's center our efforts to respond to this, right? Worker-owned co-ops, we're workers, we've experienced these things. Maybe we can do a better job with a little bit of awareness. And then that final point around helping to organize the ecosystem so it too can see, right? This network of neighbors, so they too can see these issues, center them, and respond more effectively. So I think that's
And
very
if I
powerful.
can,
Yeah, add on.
and if I can like add a little bit of that, is like now that the cooperative movement is much bigger, still small, but much bigger than it was years before, in Rhode Island. You can tell that everybody that comes to, like, for example, RICA, which is the Cooperative Alliance of Rhode Island, you'll see that people come from different places and have found out cooperatives for different reasons. And all of these reasons will be invisible if we don't create this ecosystem when everybody can like see, oh, this is what what we were not seeing. So it's like very interesting, but at the same time is like kind of like the core of like why we're doing this. So, throughout these years of the fellowship, I just feel like very enriched of like finding so much diversity on why we are all here trying to do this, trying to make this change on the economy. And I find it like very valuable. And I've also like learned a lot about how it works and why it can be pretty easy and pretty complicated at the same time.
Excellent. And so we'll have a chance to dive deeper into that with the next round. I would love to hear more about how Rika and the crew down in Rhode Island is helping to do that. So looking forward to that. I want to switch gears to Varun, kind of in the same vein, kind of how this homegrown approach to co-op development with Reset, who was very concerned with social enterprise and so on, and the solidarity economy, how that is kind of helping to create an ecosystem. So, I think for you, as you've mentioned, Varun, Connecticut seemed underdeveloped, right? And we know ecosystems or at least movements happens in ebbs and flows. And you guys came into this when it felt like nothing was happening because there's so much disconnection. People feel they're on their own, right? Silos. And so I think your project today has definitely helped to respond to that. But I want to take a step back and think, kind of how has this feeling of being siloed or disconnected from each other helped to inform your approach in co-op development and research approach, and how is it cultivating a sense of being homegrown?
Yeah, I think for me, I think that I come out of community organizing work, and I think the unit of change in movements is the relationship, or the sort of building blocks of an organization and of a movement are people and our relationships between those people. And I think that a lot of business, and economic development work just reinforces like a lot of individualism. And so we've seen here in Hartford and across Connecticut a lot of kind of just like pull yourself up by the bootstraps, like just come up with this, come up with an idea for a business, go to pitch competitions, go do an incubator, do an accelerator program, and then, like, and sort of the ecosystem approach, which is one that, again, I don't come from business development. I think I resonate with what David was sharing, like that, you know, it made sense to me when I, you know, was learning about co-op ecosystem development. You know, and I think that you know, myself as someone who's interested in starting a co-op, a worker cooperative of facilitators, was feeling that kind of isolation, feeling like I don't really know, don't have people, I don't know who to talk to here locally, don't know kind of where to go for resources, you know, and so, you know, I think that the, you know, opportunity through this fellowship of getting to explore, you know, go up to Massachusetts, go to Maine, go to New York, go to Rhode Island, and see what you know, that there are these networks, there are these federations, these associations of co-ops coming together, you know, and they look very different from each other, but that there is this vehicle for co-ops to, yeah, to support one another, and that we don't, support doesn't just have to come top down from a service provider or from a funder. You know, and I think service, you know, and I you know, come also, you know, coming from like, you know, doing mutual aid work during the early pandemic, like that was just, that's kind of the ethos that I came into this fellowship with, this idea that we, you know, no one is going to come save us. Like we have to take care of each other. And I think co-ops are, you know, I think as I've learned is like are just an extension of that at can sort of at their highest potential can be a way that we help each other, are not just, you know, and I think that and I really resonated with the sixth principle, right? Cooperation among cooperatives. And I think that sort of so yeah, that kind of sparked, you know, what ended up being my project, which is building a co-op network, a statewide co-op and solidarity economy network called Cooperate Connecticut, which is now 2 years old. We just celebrated our first annual meeting, you know, 2 weeks ago, and it's been, yeah, I think it's been a lot slower than I think I had anticipated. I came in, I think maybe unlike Desi, like I came in really excited and maybe a little naive, um, and um, and I think that this, you know, process has taught me how much, you know, we need to really, there's no shortcuts in building relationships, and I think that the and develop getting, you know, trusting one another, and the way we build trust is by working together, and that you know, and I think that this is a really hard time, um, politically, economically, for people to start a new project, a new business, a new organization. Um, so we've been, you know, it's been an uphill battle, but I think that it just, if anything, the like, attacks on our communities have, to me, like just further reinforced why this matters and how kind of like you know, this, you know, the powers that be win if we just self-isolate, right? If we end up turning on one another, and shutting down, and I think that's what they want. They want us to shut down and to kind of yeah, and give up our power, the power that we have. Um, and I think that this is, you know, it's not the only strategy to respond to that, but I think it's an important one. And and yeah, just have been really grateful to have come into the co-op movement within this sort of framing that Johan laid out, like this idea of the spirit of cooperation and thinking about cooperation as a vehicle for, you know, racial justice and not simply a way to. I don't think had I been presented with co-ops as just a business way to start businesses, I would be here. I don't think that would have spoken to me. And I think there's, you know, so I think learning to translate the sort of co-op development, like all the technical language, and talk to people about why this matters has been one of the big sort of, as an educator myself, as someone who does co-op education work, has been I think that's what I'm excited about. It's like, how do we make people realize we're already doing this? It's something a lot of our communities already do. And yeah, there are ways we can do it better. There's tools, there's frameworks, like there's like ways we can do it better, and we don't have to figure it out alone. Like there's, so I think that, yeah, but that's like easier said than done. So I still have a long way to go, and we have a long way to go, but I'm grateful to have made it this far, and yeah, I'm just proud of the progress, yeah, that we've been able to achieve here in Connecticut.
Excellent, excellent. I second that card from Charity. I think you've come a long way, you know, and have brought Connecticut with you. And I just love what you said. You know, we heard from David about seeing the invisible and making it visible to everyone else. And you guys thinking about seeing yourself as part of the whole, and how self-isolation actually disempowers you, you know, and sometimes that's the intention, right? To disempower folks or remove power by perpetuating silos, right? And how we do it to ourselves too. So I think that's so powerful, and how it ultimately informed your approach, is kind of ground up mutual aid solidarity approach that ultimately took form in the form of Co-op CT. So, you know, really inspiring and interesting. Thank you for that. You get to share a little bit more about how things evolved over time, but you know, lots of great progress. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Next, I want to invite Steph, you know, just to kind of piggyback off another thing Varun said, no shortcuts to relationship building. But you've been in this game for a while, and you have a long view, you know, something I really appreciate about you, that strategic perspective. So how is being involved in co-ops, co-op advocacy, you know, agriculture, the work that you're involved in for the amount of time that you have informed your approach and the work you've done with your host sites to help create this sense of homegrown co-op development of you know, emergent and responsive forms of co-op development that really embody that spirit of cooperation for you? How is it informed by your long-term vision?
Yeah, you know, when I got into the co-op world, it was still, you know, a little bit young. And so in New York City, um, you know, I've with some folks formed this cooperative, Brooklyn Packers, and um, became part of the New York City network of worker-owned cooperatives, or NICNAC, and on their advocacy council. And yeah, although it was like a multiracial kind of like, it is and still is a multiracial coalition of folks developing cooperatives in New York City. You know, and it has a lot of power, and it gets a lot of development money in a much bigger way than most cities do. You know, I was like still missing something. And one of those things was like the power of the actual cooperatives themselves in the development. And so being in it, like seeing that from at that time and seeing where it is now, it is much different. There's a lot more power in and a lot of more centering in the development of BIPOC cooperatives. There's new there's a lot of new worker-owned cooperatives that are not only centered in people of color, but also centered around food. And of course, a large part of like our food system is run by people of color, like the biggest part of it, the growers, and some statistic like 90%. And so I think we are starting to, we have in the last 10 years realized as people of color our power in this movement. And I think there's been an intentional, you know, witness by this fellowship, but also by other co-op developers. My work specifically is kind of the combination of food justice, advocacy, co-op development, and like an agricultural ecosystem. And so like combining all those things together, you know, 10 years ago, I couldn't see like any of the work that I do being ready to be done. But I think slowly but surely every year we are more and more getting ourselves ready for a bigger piece of power in the movement. And I think that's really, getting, how do we set the conditions for people to be ready for co-ops, to be able to like hear what a co-op is, even to be able to like be curious about co-ops. And I think that's what Desi has done, what David has done, what Varun has done, what Swain has done, is really like in these communities that are much smaller than New York City. There's an opportunity for less distraction, and also you can, as an individual, listen in a different way, and people can also listen to you in a different way. And so that's been really interesting to hear. And it's something that I did not know was going on before this fellowship. So it's been really beautiful to watch. As somebody coming from, being in this probably the longest of all of us, and still having a lot to learn and learning from y'all. I don't know. It's like this thing that I've learned about where real power comes from. And like for me, the power of the ecosystem that is the food and the power of the food workers. How much they intentionally are setting up ways to care for each other through like mutual aid and wellness. There's a lot of herbalism and a lot of like earth-centered healing and cooperatives that are like popping up. There's a lot of like farmer cooperatives that people who have farms are converting to cooperative. There's a lot of that happening. There's like restaurants converting. It's really great to see. There's the big overall solidarity movement between movements. There's in the co-op movement, there's the worker-owned cooperatives, there's the housing cooperatives, there's producer cooperatives, there's all types of cooperatives that are talking to each other. It's becoming less siloed, and this is what's happened over the last 10 years. And then there's like the storytelling part. What are the stories? We have to control our own narratives. If you look at the news, they'll tell you that we're not, that this is, that the sky is purple instead of blue. If you look at the news, you'll be hearing all these stories. You'll be, hearing about violence where there is no violence. You'll be hearing about things that are happening. Sometimes it's purple. You're right. Yeah, sometimes they're reporting on things that are not happening and not reporting on the things that are happening. So, and so we have to be in control of our own stories and control our own narratives. And that's actually when you put all those things together, that's actually when you have real power. And so those are the things that I've really have become more and more interested in. I am not a person that gets out there with a picket sign and protests. But this is the way that I protest. This is the way that I help to feed and advance a movement that's based on like care and respect and what human beings like actually really need in their lives. And over the last 10 years, I've really seen the power of what we can do when we do things together. And so it's been an amazing journey thus far.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love this thread that's happening between us. Desi talked about just seeing what's there, appreciating what's there, listening to it. David talked about seeing the invisible, those harms, and centering our gatherings, our ecosystem around responding to those harms. Varun talked about seeing ourselves as connected parts of wholes rather than disconnected, disempowered, siloed. And now I'm hearing from you around seeing our power as part of a solidarity movement, across movements, right? How do you actually deal with seeing our own power, right? Because it's like you're trying to play Scrabble without vowels, right? You're missing essential ingredients. At least it sounds like that for you for years, right? You're seeing the words that could be put together. You're seeing the story we could tell, but you've got a bunch of words missing vowels. And now you're at a point where you're connecting these movements where we do have those essential ingredients, right? And I think to add more to that, this idea of we're seeing a lot of service providers at the beginning of this journey thinking of themselves as the ecosystem. But what about the co-ops, right? We are the missing ingredient. So I kind of love that. I love that. And I love this theme and this thread that I'm seeing. So, okay. I'm going to give you guys a chance to dive deeper into this concept of ecosystem. We've mentioned it a few times, and I think a lot of us have different ideas around what it means to refer to an ecosystem, to a co-op ecosystem. So I love to demystify, and the way I try to do that is to think about what an ecosystem is, right? When we use that term, we're thinking of an environment that supports life. And therefore, a co-op ecosystem is an environment that supports co-op life, right? So we know co-op life requires cooperators who are aware of the model, who are trained, who are able to exercise the key skill sets of cooperation and ultimately business. We know there's service providers, legal, accounting, marketing, insurance, whatever else, right? We know there are customers and clients in that community who have to care enough about co-ops to choose to shop there, right? We've got a network of neighbors, right? The human ecosystem is the neighborhood. And so we can think about the neighborhood of actors who are concerned with making co-op life possible. So I would love for you guys to take some time to share around how your neighborhood has changed over time. What has become more supportive to co-op life there? What do you think you can attribute that to? And how do we catalyze that? How do we see more value exchanges, high quality interaction between these neighbors so that more co-op life can emerge, survive, and flourish? So maybe we could do it random. Wanna invite Varun first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to not repeat myself.
You're good. Sometimes we
Um,
need to hear it twice. But anyway, take your time. Yep.
yeah, I think it's I guess I could highlight a couple examples. I think and this is no credit to me or to, my work by any means. But one thing we've seen here in Connecticut is a real emergence of many more cooperatives in the immigrant community. And so there's an organization, I'm going to shout out Havenly in New Haven, that's immigrant and refugee women led. That's been also sort of fighting against doing workforce development and have sort of shifted fighting against kind of workplace discrimination that immigrant and refugee women experience, and also like domestic and interpersonal violence that immigrant refugee women experience, and have really started to invest in co-op development. And so there's a number of projects emerging, a childcare cooperative, an artisan cooperative, a credit union that is emerging out of that. There's a cleaning cooperative, a bookkeeping cooperative. So there's this like kind of emerging hub in New Haven. Our housing co-op movement has been, really, again, no credit to me or any of the work I've done, but I've just been seeing kind of, we have a really successful housing cooperative project in Waterbury called a Brookside Cooperative, and they're really, there's a nonprofit and that's kind of stewarding that cooperative, and they've been really, getting more media attention and really trying to spread the housing cooperative model across the state, limited equity housing cooperative model, combined with community land trust as a way to secure permanently affordable housing, which is something that I'm excited to see expand. There's Black farmers around the state that have formed a cooperative called Liberated Land Cooperative and are, running CSAs and increasing access to land for Black farmers. And And so there's these projects that are emerging kind of in some ways like kind of parallel to one another. And what I'll say is that, I got to witness in person at our annual meeting, less than 2 weeks ago, is seeing the leaders of these projects, and people who are new. Like there were people who showed up to our annual meeting who were like, I don't know what a cooperative is. My friend invited me. And getting to see them sit at the table together and talk to each other and exchange stories, and we shared, and we did an offers and needs market, and getting to see people just identify what they have to offer. And everyone has something to offer, whether you're like Steph, you're OG in this movement, right? Or you just got here yesterday. Like we all have something to offer, and we all have needs. And I think that so that yeah, so we've had potluck dinners, we've had a lot of educational workshops, and just seeing that like cross sector, there's connections across sectors, across demographics, having spaces like we've been really pushing to have childcare and interpretation in all of our spaces. And so seeing parents and caregivers and Spanish speakers be able to participate. I did a co-op development workshop, at shout out to Havenly again, with their one of their programs that was translated into 4 different languages, Arabic, French, Amharic, and Spanish. And so to see like just the kinds of ways that we're kind of expanding who is part of our movement. Really not, actually immigrant communities have been co-ops are much more prominent in many parts of the world compared to the US. Like I feel like the narrative that's often taught about the co-op movement here in the US is very young, Eurocentric. But a lot of communities are coming, with a spirit of cooperation and with deep histories of like cooperative economic practice. And even if they use different words to describe those practices. And so I think that getting to like see that cross-cultural exchange has been really, again, I don't know if it's so like David's point, like it's just to me it's more visible. Maybe it's like it existed, but I think seeing that like cross-pollination is been exciting, and I think it inspires possibilities to me of like, I went to a meetup 2 years ago in Waterbury, and there's a Black-led food co-op that's emerging. There's the housing co-op project I mentioned. And then there's a nonprofit that's incubating, doing business incubation. None of them were aware of each other before that. The food co-op folks were like, "Oh, I didn't know there were other kinds of co-ops," right? Like, there's like kind of so this, now, and I think, facilitating the connection between these co-ops, I mean, the relationship is just, at least I'm trying to lay the groundwork, right? Like it's going to take more work for us to actively figure out how do we work together. But I think that the connection exists, the medium, the platforms for us to be able to connect with one another, we're starting to build. And hopefully people can take advantage of them. I think that breaking out of that again, the like tendency to want to work in silos and kind of not trust one another, not ask for help. That's going to take work. That's a cultural shift that's going to have to happen, and we're not going to transform. That's not going to go away overnight. But yeah, I think that the willingness to like show up for one another, even just seeing like 75 people in Connecticut who are excited about co-ops in a room together, and to me that's a huge win. Like that's like and people, I just talked to someone who came to that annual meeting, who I met. We have a virtual peer support space. This is the last thing I'll say on this is we have a monthly virtual peer support space for cooperators in Connecticut, and someone came, who was interested in starting a housing cooperative, and came to the meetup. It was like 2 weeks before our annual meeting. Was like, oh, we have this annual meeting. Showed up, brought a friend, and then I talked to them the other day, and they signed up to be a member. We just launched our official membership model, and they're like excited, like sign me up. Like how can I be involved? Like that, like energy, I think is like, of again, I don't know. It's hard to see what that will translate into, like the material change that will happen. I think I still have a lot of questions about the impact and how do we actually measure impact, and how do we like, especially at a time when we're losing so much federal funding, we're losing so much grant funding. Like there's a lot of like businesses are, sometimes businesses fail. Like we've had co-ops also just didn't survive here in Connecticut. because our conditions just aren't right now that friendly for cooperatives, and that but I hope that that doesn't mean that we lose those people to the co-op movement, and that we can hopefully harvest those lessons. And I think that like my hope is that we're, by having a network, having a place to return to where we can help support each other to stay in it for the long haul and not give up when those first couple of years of starting a co-op, it's going to be hard, and your initial idea might not work. Initial team members, in my experience, like the people who I thought was going to collaborate with on my cooperative were not the right people for the project. And I think that, but I think had I not had this community of people, like, you all here on this call, and like, I don't know if I would have stayed in there. I would have been like, screw this, but I think I'm like, oh, like, I need to, this is, I'm not new. I'm not you. This isn't unique. My experience is actually very common. And so I think that like, connectivity is something that I think didn't exist for sure 3 years ago. And I think I can say confidently exists more today than it did. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. Having come to the meeting last week and just seeing the development over the last 3 years, I've come down to Connecticut for different reasons. I think, you've made an impact, and the others who've come to the party, right? We're all dancing, right? Whether you're worker co-op, businesses, housing co-op, now folks are coming into contact with each other, and it's influencing them, their next attempt at business, at doing housing, whatever their career takes them, even if that particular project doesn't become what they thought it was, right? Each iteration, each generation changing and bringing them closer together in solidarity. I love that, right? I think about that as coevolution, right? How do the folks in our community, how do the institutions, because they're interacting with each other, how does that inform their evolution, their changes over time, that proximity, right? So you're coming in, you're doing the robot, right? Your housing co-op robot guy, you got business guy doing the running man, and now we got the running robot, right? We got different things happening. So I kind of love that dance that you're describing. So let's keep rocking. I want to hear from you guys how that's happening for you guys, how your ecosystem, your neighborhood is becoming more supportive of co-op life, and where is coevolution happening, right? How is that energy being amplified and exchanged? Or, where is it being drained, and how have you responded to that? So whatever comes to mind, I want to invite Desi next, if you're able.
Yes. Well, I was just thinking about, the principles behind kind of like the spirit of cooperation, actually getting the opportunity to, when I was the first year of the fellowship, I kind of went to the P6 conference, and I was like, P6, I don't really know what that means, and now I think that has been really how I've formed my ecosystem, is showing up to conferences, getting to show up to the fellows and learning about the cooperative ecosystems there, and not just here in Maine, because I think that if we're looking at decolonizing the cooperative movement, it's more so, and then looking at ecosystems and looking at food systems. I wore my Three Sisters shirt today just to, remind myself to just like think about, sometimes I think the things that help ecosystems in the cooperative movement grow up tall are legislation. And so what I've seen is legislation be passed like in 2023, and it was the opportunity to purchase law. And then through that law and through that legislation, we saw communities get excited and be trained up to, buy communities or real estate when it, and have that opportunity, and to be the first, and to see what it's like to, get together the funds. And that's when you can move quickly. That's when I see an ecosystem, seeing ecosystems bloom very fast here, and housing is extremely important. And so, looking at community as like that ground covering, you got to cover that ground. You got to plant those seeds together. And then who's climbing, who's growing this season, and that will change, I think, each year, and being able to flow out when you need to, and know that you'll still be covered, and others will climb, and that how you're welcomed back in through the spirit of cooperation. I think that's what I can now say, about what I'm looking for in the ecosystem, to be able to grow and expand, and that I've seen more of, and that I'm able to identify, even though it might not be, or they're still figuring out how to be an official cooperative. I'm seeing that spirit of cooperation. I'm seeing institutions who are, doing the same work, joining forces and collaborating in my community, that maybe I wouldn't even be able to recognize before, like seeing that invisible work now, or moving from, spaces that are very one monocrop kind of planting to how do we uncover and know what was planted here before and kind of restore, instead of, just banging out that moneymaker, I guess, and so that takes time, and yeah, it's been great to have the time to be able to start to recognize these patterns in these ecosystems.
Excellent. I love that. Natural weaving, it's got me thinking about, again, the energy, the people coming together, how visible and visceral that is in Varun's example, for example, versus the policy changes that might happen in the backdrop that now allow communities to purchase assets or businesses, and be given that option. And so I love that. I love the organic metaphor too, kind of the monocrop as the status quo, kind of colonized approach, just do one thing, it's going to work, we'll extract the value, we'll exploit the labor and whatever else, and then, hoard it for ourselves, right? Versus the regenerative agriculture approach, right? How does what is planted here regenerate the soils and continue to create synergy and harmony, like the three sisters, right? Working together. Love that. So, David, I want to ask you next to kind of speak to how your ecosystem has evolved. I know with Rika, you guys have done some policy changes. I see a question in the chat around, how are things being affected now? So you can take your time and speak to that. But in general, how has your environment become more supportive, and how also has it become less supportive given what we know is going on around the immigrants' justice issue?
Yeah, okay, I'll try to I'll try to talk about both things, and I'll try to see how can I just like connect both things at the same time, right? So I think in the organization that I am, in the nonprofit organization that I am, which works as a worker center, we are just a small grassroots nonprofit, but the way that we have been able to accomplish what we have accomplished is because we have such a large ecosystem here in Rhode Island. So Rhode Island does goes with this stereotype that it's a small state. So you really get to know many people from different sectors and many organizations, and everybody works with one another, and everybody kind of like knows someone that can help you, or you can help them. So the ecosystem, the idea like of collaboration, of cooperativism exists without you calling it that way. It's in there, it's ingrained. As we are surrounded by very powerful states like New York and Connecticut and Massachusetts. So Rhode Island kind of like understand its survival in cooperation in a way. So we have been able throughout the years to know the importance of working together as an ecosystem, and everybody can put a little bit of like what they can do and how they can help, right? Now, being more precise on what the cooperative movement has been in Rhode Island, I will say it was some businesses would have the structure of cooperatives, but it's through the 2016 policy change that we were able to just start calling cooperatives worker-owned cooperatives in a way that like it was already the legal, the legal background was set up, as Desi was saying. And from there, it also happened like the way Varun was also describing Connecticut, which was like, oh, you guys are doing this. Oh, you guys are doing this. How are you doing it? How are we doing it? And then it's like, oh, we have this in common. We're learning from one another, etc., etc. And in that way, RICA forms. And RICA is an alliance of cooperatives here in Rhode Island, which has, is it 13 or 15? I'm blurring on the number right now, of like small cooperatives. All of them are pretty small. Most of them are new, not all of them. For example, solar power. Sol Power has almost 10 years and works as a cooperative. And for example, White Electric Cafe, it's a conversion. The owner sold to the employees and the employees took over. So everybody has their own different flavor. And it also works that they are like in very different communities, right? And in very different industries. So, there's people selling flowers or selling cannabis, or there's a bookstore, there's a cafe, there's a 3D anatomy center. So all of them have different things, but in the spirit of cooperation, everybody allies through the same principles, which is very interesting because you get to know people that you like, and which is not always the case. And also, the same experience happened to me within the fellowship. We were in one of the retreats, and it was like, oh, we know what we're talking about. All of us, we don't have to like decipher what the other one is saying, or I don't have to like extra explain what I'm saying, because we know about this cooperative movement that we want to make happen, and at the same time, all of these like allies, all of this like comes together in like, also we have like maybe similar taste in things, or like similar views of the worlds and politics, which is very interesting, and I think it's very valuable because you're not alone. We just need to get to know each other and meet each other and work together. So that is like a very positive thing of everything that is happening. However, power is power, and it's very difficult to fight power. And power right now belongs to people that are doing everything that they can to undermine and to hurt the immigrant population of the country. So there has been already two co-ops that have been founded here in Rhode Island by immigrants, and both of them have failed. Both of them have ended. We are trying to make new ones right now. As Wanda was asking on the chat, Fuerza Laboral is a co-op incubator. People come to us and we help them develop their own cooperative. So people here that wants to start a cooperative here in Rhode Island has both the backup of RICA as an alliance to start business, and from Fuerza Laboral to incubate and develop their business. But yeah, like any type of pushback that you think an immigrant cooperative can face is facing or has faced. However, the structure of cooperatives is it's curious enough. It's, you know, it's unique enough that allows some people that in other ways could not own a business to own a business. So we could be facing all of, you know, we could be facing everything that this administration is throwing at us, and cooperatives are still the answer for economic development for immigrant communities. And as we know, economic power is also power. So if we can strengthen the economic power of immigrant communities, then the tables are going to turn, or at least I want to be hopeful in that way.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Weaving it all together for us. Yes. Yes. Great, Wanda. I think it's a good example.
Trying.
No, I like it because it kind of speaks to the fact that you can start seeing the connections that happen when you bring people together, right? And you can start seeing what happens when you have some policy backbone, some legislative efforts to support how people identify and engage with co-ops. And then you can even have that special sauce you mentioned of just liking each other, right? We're all from different parts of the Northeast and we have things in common. And then it's time to face power. And it's not easy. It's not easy. And having faith in the righteousness of your struggle and in your eventual victory. So, you know, that's Imani in the Kwanzaa principles, one of my favorites. So, you know, I think that's really important to understand that even if you have all these layers and building blocks, you still have to eventually fight power and cultivate your own power to do that with. So appreciate you, David. Thank you for sharing all that. All right. So Steph, give you kind of the last word on this piece before we all have our final last words. How have you seen through the past 3 years your co-op ecosystem become more supportive to co-op life?
No, I'll try to give a quick answer.
Yeah. I know.
I mean, you know, it's interesting. In the last few years, there's been, you know, this, you know, in the ecosystem of like food and farming that I'm part of, you know, which is, you know, just a, you know, a reflection of what anybody needs in any walk of life, which is like land for producing or living. You need education. In my sense, we, you know, in our ecosystem, we have Farm School NYC, we have Soulfire Farm that educate land stewards. We have, you know, the farms themselves, or the farmers themselves that come out of those education or not. You know, you know, farmers need distribution, which we do, and farmers and food folks need markets to sell to. And we need you know, capitalization of all these things, you know, and in every one of these things, there's a representative, there's a co-op representative in all of these things. So we are sometimes, you know, a few of these things. You know, we are distribution, we are markets, we are transportation, sometimes we're education. And then you have other players that do, you know, the capital, like Black Farmer Fund, or Pot Liquor Capital, or CFNE, or, you know, we have all these things that are necessary to build, you know, a healthy ecosystem. I would say the things that we, you know, we probably need, even though we have all these things, and we're rich with all these things, what we don't really have is a lot of coordination. And I've seen last 3 years, coordination has gotten a lot better between movements, and even inside of the movement, inside of the food movement, there's been a lot more coordination to like to be kind of like the glue to make the connections between all of these things that need each other. And so that's been really exciting, and it's moved it's definitely like accelerated the work that we do. We've been able to strategically, through conversation and through just like knowing our roles in the ecosystem, move the movement further, faster. We've been able to strategically ask for money in a very strategic way, like separately asking for for money to fund the pieces of the the food supply chain that we're really good at as individual organizations and work together. The way that funders are asking questions on their applications about, like, who do you work with? Who are you in alliance with? Are you a cooperative? Do you work with any cooperatives? Those are all really important things, which give clues to how important, you know, the alliances and the cooperation is in the eyes of like how things are built. It's, you know, it's one thing to like fund an individual organization that's doing work, but if you can fund 10 organizations that are doing good work that are connected to each other, you know, it's bound to be more successful. And so I've seen a lot of that kind of thing really evolve in the last like few years. And I think that's an important way moving forward. I think where there could be improvement is like the relational aspect of all the work that we do. When we're not getting along, when we don't like have conflict resolution things embedded in the beginning of our you know, the beginning of our formations of our organizations, it really can get to us. And so I even see that evolving too. We're getting more, I think we're seeing more like, oh, like conflict is inevitable. How do we embed some conflict evolution or resolution in the beginnings of our organizations and the startups of our organizations and the formations of our alliances? And I think that is really important so we can have like long-term growth and long-term positive relations between movements, and because these are all interdependent movements. And so I think we need to like keep doing what we're doing in a lot of ways, and analyze, step back, see what we can do better. And I think we're definitely on the right path.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. I think you introduced a few key concepts that we hadn't fully engaged, you know. I think that conflict piece is so important, you know, having that coordination at this point and recognizing how conflict will play a role, and ultimately capital, right? We've been talking about many forms of capital, human, social, but that financial capital that an organization like CFNE is primed to provide, but we need the ecosystem in place, right? The people come together. We need the policies there. We need people to like each other, and we need people to be coordinated and responsive to conflict, right? It's kind of a lot, but the C factor is so powerful that it will see us through. And I think you guys are just a living testament to that. So really appreciate you for sharing your stories, you know, from coevolution to the C factor here. And I want to give you guys a chance to have a last word. These experiences that we're having, you know, they're layered, right? We're not the first to do this, even though some of us might feel that way, and we're not the last. So some of our experiences are going to have ripple effects that goes beyond what we can see right now, right? So I want to invite you to share kind of what are some of the experiences that are still having an impact, that will continue to have an impact from your perspective, and how do you then kind of consider that as a message or an invitation to the next generation, right? What experiences have had an impact, will continue to, and how does that help you to invite the next generation in or to give them a message? So what do you guys have to say to the next generation? We'll start with David.
What is the message? I think the message is that don't miss out, for sure. This has been edifying and fun. I really like everyone that I got the opportunity to have the fellowship with. And I'm pretty sure that it will happen to you as well if you do it for the second cohort. I think that it's a space to learn not only through concepts and theory, but it's also a way to learn who is surrounding you and how they do it. So you not only learn from what comes from deep down, but like from the sides, which are the other fellows. And I also think that it will get you more in touch as well with like get you more in touch with yourself. Like you also learn about yourself a little bit in the fellowship. So that it's also that I will find like very valuable. Like don't miss out.
Don't miss the party. Thank you, David. Make sure to show up. You don't want to miss the Fuerza Laboral party either. It's fantastic over there. Varun?
Yeah, I'd say pace yourself.
Excellent. Wise words for Varun.
Yeah. Yeah, 3 years seemed when I started, 3 years seemed like a really long time, you know. And now I'm like, it blinked and it's over.
Mhm.
And so, and we've done a lot, but I think I had all these ambitions, and I still do, but I think I've realized how long this is going to take. And so, um, yeah, it's yeah, learning how to not burn myself out in the process and how to kind of yeah, find ways to, like David said, like have fun during the journey, lean on each other, not rest, set more maybe realistic goals, and yeah, pace yourself.
Thank you. Wise words indeed. Steph? Sounds like you're thinking.
uh, I say this, I believe in cooperatives as life, you know, like life is cooperative. That's what it is. And those, cooperatives life and cooperatives life is more meaningful in person. So we gotta get off the screens and see each other in person. That's what makes it more meaningful.
Absolutely. Plenty of opportunities with that with the fellowship.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Steph. And Desiree, you have the last word. What's your message or invitation to the next generation?
Oh, well, I mean, definitely plant more things for sure. I had my hands in the garden last week, and I think one of the first co-op curious person I met was a woman and who was also an elder, and her name's Tammy Connolly, and you all got to meet her on one of the retreats. And and I think I've met up with her through so many different organizations now, but all through farming. And you know yeah, I think the advice is definitely know who has come before you, because I think that when you take the time to do the research so that you can show up fully to these experiences, I think, yeah, not underestimating the work that has been done before, and that knowing that you're someone's dream, you're someone, you're someone's blossom, someone's fruit, that someone really planted before. I think that's kind of the gift, and taking the time to like reach out and get to know who was there before, who's currently there, and who, yeah, getting to know your ecosystem in that way, and doing that pre-work, and showing up fully. That feels important, and I had enough time to do that fully here, and to meet Tammy at the beginning of my fellowship, and to just like have some time planting with her, closing out the gardens. I mean, just the other day was like so sweet. So yeah, I think it's reach out, keep connecting and cooperating together, and finding ways to find what keeps you connected, and kind of like hold on to that.
Love it. You brilliant people. I'm so proud of you guys. I think, in summary, we gotta have fun, right? We gotta pace ourselves. We gotta show up in real life, and we gotta keep our hands in the garden, because that's how we stay connected. You know what I mean? I think we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, and our descendants are our destiny. So keep the faith. Appreciate you guys. Can't wait for the next cohort to meet you and to continue this legacy. We're gonna end the night here. And if folks have the opportunity to stay on for questions, entertain that. But we want to respect your time and make sure we end on time. So for anyone who is interested in what's next, I'll share my screen briefly and share this quote. So what unfolds next is a quiet remembering of what wholeness feels like. With patience and compassion, we begin to see that healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about listening to what's been waiting to be heard. You guys who have been waiting for in the audience, in the fellowship. So we thank you for coming and being here and helping us to get to this next step. If anyone's interested, we'll send out this slide deck. It'll have a summary of the fellows' activities, and it'll have our one-pager, the executive summary. You can scan this QR code to request the full report and indicate your interest in being a part of the fellowship in whatever format. If you guys have any questions for us, reach out. We've got lots of content on the fellowship at our website, at our YouTube page, and you can just email us or sign up for a coaching call if you would like some help on your journey. So thank you all. We really appreciate you guys for being here. And for anyone who's watching this recording, you've got this. Keep going. All right. Good night.